Fantastic. So, I guess that means we're live now. So, it worked eventually.
Eventually, got to sort it out. I'm going to go ahead and connect to the stream on my phone and turn the volume off on that. That way, I can monitor.
Okay, Marco's told me it sounds perfect on his end too. Great. So, welcome to the live video of the podcast at Delphi.org. I'm your host, Jim McKeith. Joining me is, right next to me here is David Millington. Hey, David.
Hello, everyone.
Can I reposition these videos here? Nope. Okay, and then over here on the far end is Craig Chapman.
Hello.
Let's see. Let's turn off that and close the door. Okay. So I just realized I had my video shared twice through the... so I'm using OBS Studio, Open Broadcast Studio, to stream the GoToMeeting video. So that's how we're making this all work. So that's how everybody's able to join via YouTube when we're on GoToMeeting here. So, I'm going to open with, let's see, Barcadero Academy. So I was going to come out here and show, I guess I can turn on my, hey, look, now you can see me and see this at the same time. And my dog opened the door. If there's a door that's closed, my dog has to be on the side of the door. I'm not sure what is her issue about that. So she just came in to open the door. So if it gets noisy again, I apologize. So this is the, if you want to go out to Embarcadero Academy, you can catch the Code Rage replays. They're all out here. And there was a special offer here. Let me see if I can find it down here at the bottom. This one's definitely worth checking out. This is a special offer from cleancoders.com, which Uncle Bob joined us for this. And let me put this, oops. There we go. Since I'm looking this way, now it looks like I'm looking at the screen. Oh, this expired. I'll have to get a new one. Hopefully everybody used this code. I'll see if I can get a new code because this one's expired. This was for a free episode of cleancoders.com. And so hopefully you used it because it expired already. But I'll see if I can get a new one. Anyway, there's still lots of great content out on here from Code Rage. And we've gone through, and most of these actually do have closed captioning on them now. So you can, if you're on here, you're probably English tolerant. But if you're not, then you can use the closed captioning to make it easier to follow along if you're better at reading English than understanding English. So that is a useful tidbit here. So with that, Craig or David, either of you have something you want to share real quick?
Just welcome. This is the first time we've done the live podcast. So a few technical difficulties getting started, but I think these things happen. I think, by the way, I mean, Jim and Craig, both of you have been online and part of the Delphi world for years, including giving videos and that kind of thing. For many of you who are watching, you may not actually have seen me before unless you've met me in person at a conference.
That's true.
So
think about that.
If that is true, hello.
Yeah, so David is our C++ product manager, and also you're in charge of the debugger and the IDE and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, the IDE, the debugger, all that stuff.
So this is interesting. There's two of me now. There's this one in GoToMeeting, and then there's this one that is on the stream, and they're mirrored, so I'm looking at myself right now. Okay. Yeah, so debugger, IDE, and stuff like that. So in the IDE, we have something cool that just came out in the new 10.2.2. Yeah.
Yeah, 10.2.2. And that would be the dark theme.
The dark theme.
Well, a couple of things new that came out, actually. The dark theme is the big one. And people have been asking for a dark theme for a long time.
Do you want to show your screen?
And
I can do this.
Sorry, Jim, you said something, but I couldn't quite hear what it was.
Do you want to show your screen?
That's an excellent idea. Just let me find parallels. I'll just keep talking about it while I get that started. Yeah, so a dark theme is something many people have wanted for quite some time. It's easier on the eyes. It's not necessarily something that you have to use when you're coding at night, although if you are a sort of late night developer, then it's useful for sort of lower light conditions as well. I tend to work many hours and well into the evening, mostly because I sync with America.
I was going to say, yeah, it's in the evening right now for you, right?
It is, yeah. It's about 8 p.m.
8 p.m.
So I'm just switching over to the dark theme right now while that's going on. And let me see if I can share that.
I think we should rename it the Kylo Ren theme.
I'm just going to try to stop sharing my webcam to see if that enables a screen sharing option. So I'm going to vanish for a while.
Say share your screen. Now we just see Craig. Hi, Craig. There, I'm back.
Alrighty, so hopefully you can see the dark theme on screen right now. So this is Red Studio 10.2.2. I have some projects open. This is C++. Delphi exists as well. And as you can see, let me know if you can see that.
Yep, I can see.
As you can see, it's quite a pleasant charcoal kind of theme. It's not black and white. And one of the things we really wanted to do was to focus on making it easy to see, easy on the eyes. It's a low contrast theme. So white text, for example, is actually very slightly off-white. It's about 250, 250, 250 in RGB terms. And instead of having a black background, it's a dark gray background. You can see there are the shades of dark gray there. The form designer, if I just toggle over to that, Delphi code there for a moment. The form designer is not themed, and that's very deliberate. One of the important things when form designing is that what you design, what you see is what you actually get. And so while the IDE is themed around the designer, this is the VCL designer up right now, same for FMX, the designer itself remains unthemed and needs to actually look like Windows. You can see the colors everywhere in the object inspector, for example, with this pleasant sort of blue. And we have a new editor theme as well, which is rather nice. So yeah, that's new in 10.2.2.
And it's easy to switch between the themes too, right? Can you show that real quick?
It is, yeah. The whole virtual machine is slowed down when I share via GoToMeeting, so I won't show that, but there's a toolbar button right here. So on the desktop layout toolbar button, where you might have previously chosen between different layouts, your default or debug layout or something like that, it's a new drop-down button. You just use dark theme or light theme. You can also directly change the editor color scheme as well. When you change between light and dark, it will change both the ID and the editor color scheme as appear. And you can configure that. You can say, when I have the dark theme, I want to use this particular editor color scheme, and the same for the light theme.
And one thing that's cool is you can do custom themes too. So here, there's a blog post here. Let me bring this up here. And I'm probably not pronouncing this right. Griggy, Griggj. Are you guys seeing my screen now? Okay, good. So they created an alternative dark theme for a 10.2.2. And so when David had that drop down menu there, you can actually have a custom theme there. You can load in any theme for the Chrome, the IDE itself, and then this is alternative editor themes here that you can load in. So if you want a slightly different editor theme, you can load those in from here, or you can load in a different theme for the IDE itself. So it's nice that that's customizable. You can create your own variations on it. I was actually thinking about checking out one of these as well and changing it up just because, I can.
Well, that's why we put it there.
Yeah.
So while you're talking, Jim, I put the options dialog on the screen. So just in the IDE options, there's the theme manager section, and this has the same settings as in the drop-down, but allows you to choose some of the particular settings. So, for example, for the dark theme, I can choose the editor color scheme and the object inspector color scheme that are set when I want to use the dark theme. There's this custom radio button here as well. And the IDE theming actually uses Visio Styles. And so you can use any registered Visio style that you happen to have with the IDE. Now, we don't actually really support that. We only support light and dark officially. But given where they're using Visio Styles, we knew that the moment we added Visio Style support in the IDE, many people would ask, can we use a custom style? Would have been a terrible thing to reply no. So we made sure that we added support for that.
That's one thing about development tools is that there's so many, as developers, we want to customize all sorts of stuff. And then there's so many permutations and stuff once you get into things. And so it's like, you try and support as much as you can and then let people throw on their own for the rest of it. It's kind of
well, Delphi and Red Studio in general have so many settings. It's a bit of a decision, actually. Do you add something extra like this, especially if you decide not to support it? I mean, we can't support an arbitrary style because we don't know how that arbitrary style is actually going to look and be rendered. But I do believe in giving people options and tools to do what you want. And so that's why we added the custom radio button here.
Apparently, my mic is a little quiet, so I can boost that up here. Hopefully that's better. Is that better?
That is. You're much louder now.
Okay, good deal. My mic is a little ways from me, so.
So there's one other new thing in the whole kind of scheme of UI and UX and that kind of thing that we added in 10.2.2, which is a new welcome page. Mm-hmm. So I'll just switch over to that. I'll switch over to the startup layout. This will take a while to resize because GoToWebinar does slow this down. When you start the IDE for the first time, it will look like this. And we have the concept of layouts as you've probably already familiar. When you switch to debugging, when you start debugging, the IDE will change and show different windows. That's because it uses the debug layout. You can see that here. It'll use the debug layout, and you can actually choose which layout you want it to use when debugging. So the layout is just a set of which windows are visible and whether they're pinned to the side or whether they're docked and that kind of thing. And so that's basically a state machine. You go between coding and debugging or back again. We added a third state in that state machine in 10.2.2, which is when you have no files or projects open, such as when you start the IDE fresh. And when you do, you see this. This is the welcome screen, and you can see that all the other Chrome has been minimized away to the side. So the welcome screen has everything that it already had before: getting started, create a new project. You can get access to the platforms if you install with the Get-It installer, get add-ins from Get-It, and it has the favorites and open recent as well. But we also added sample applications, and these are really neat because they live on Get-It. So you can just click the item here, connect to Get-It, download the project, open the project straight away, just in a single click. Of course, if you've already downloaded it, then clicking it will just open it. It's a really nice way to see some of the demos showing what Delphi or CBuilder can do. And as you can see, this is all in one scrollable section here. We actually had a hotfix that came out late last night, my time, that made some changes here. So go to blogs.embarcadero.com and check for that. And as well as that, we have some useful feeds on the right-hand side, so you can see some upcoming events. So we have a lot of webinars and events here at Embarcadero, and this lists a bunch of them that are coming up. You'll see, for example, some of them are repeated 3 times. It's because they're in different time zones. So this actually shows the local time, your own local time, wherever your computer is located. So I can say, for example, okay, Delphi in the blockchain, that sounds really interesting. 3 p.m. session is one that I can attend. You click that, it'll open, and you can register.
We probably need to have time zones
Similarly
on there.
for YouTube. Sorry, Jim, go ahead.
So I probably need to add time zones there, so you know 3 p.m. what time zone.
Oh, actually, it's the local.
Oh, is that your
time zone.
local time zone? Oh,
So
oh, you're right. It is. Okay. Yep.
It should show that. And below that, there's YouTube videos. We put a lot of videos up on YouTube, and this is just a feed of all the ones we've uploaded recently. So we hope here that when you start Red Studio, before you reopen a project, that you'll cast an eye over this, and perhaps you'll see some interesting upcoming webinars, or perhaps you'll see some interesting content on webinar that we on YouTube that we put up, and yeah, click it, watch it, sign up.
Yeah. Cool. I didn't catch that was time zones. I guess because they're already in my time zone, I just assumed it was my time zone for everybody. So here's that link for the hotfix that David was mentioning right here. If you come out here, you can get the 10.2.2 welcome page and documentation hotfix, which is a good one to get. And also, I noticed that there is a webinar missing that is coming up this week. It's the, let's see if I can find the link for it here. Somehow I didn't get it on the community site. It's the Enterprise Connectors webinar. So you can check that one out here. I'll put the, actually I can put that link here in the YouTube. I can find the window.
Should you make the Enterprise Connectors and Social Media Mining for Data webinar? Is that on the 15th? Oh, 15th of February.
18th
That
of
must be
February.
different Enterprise Connectors.
Where do you see that at? Is that on the...
In the upcoming events feed.
Okay, apparently I messed something up putting on the calendar. So that's my mistake. I'll fix that. Because it is the 18th. It's this week. 18th. So. Okay, so I will fix that. It's on the wrong day. That's why I didn't see it. I was like, I know I put that on the community, but I put it on the wrong day. So many dates. I get things mixed up. I apologize. So, Craig, do you have something you'd like to share real quick?
Well, it was suggested that I show what I'm currently working on, which is some neural network code. So if you'd like to see that, I can do that.
Okay, let's change presenter to Craig.
Okay, let me see if I can share my screen here. Oh, screen, there it is. Should be up now.
We can see that, yes.
Excellent. Okay, so for my blog back in latter months of last year, I started a series on building neural networks. In particular, the series was a very sort of beginner level how to build a simple perceptron neural net. And the code for it was not particularly clean. It wasn't particularly well written. It was really just a sort of experiment to get you started. And I avoided things like matrix notation and calculus and that kind of thing, and just showed a simple sort of linear way to do the calculations. And it's my intention to follow up with a matrix math-based implementation of Perceptron. And that's what I've got written here. So I'll go through some of the code here. A lot of this stuff is just supporting libraries from my existing code base. So giving me Unicode support, access to the Windows API and stuff like that. But where I get started...
I really like the number of packages you have. That seems very nicely split up.
This actually is just a small number of the packages that I have laying around. I have a habit of writing frameworks rather than applications. So this is just the number of packages needed to make this work. But it splits up basically into sections of logical functions. So I didn't want to sort of bundle everything into one package and call it a runtime. I wanted to break it out and make each one its own thing. And one of the main reasons for that, if I quickly connect up to my dev server here, is that I'm running Jenkins to build... I don't want to view updates, leave me alone. I'm using Jenkins to build most of this stuff. And I actually haven't put everything into the Subversion server yet. I actually restarted building the Subversion and Jenkins builds for the webinar that I did about a month back on Jenkins. So I basically dumped my existing Jenkins build server and started over. And so if I go and look here, most of this stuff is the stuff that I've pulled in just for the code that I'm writing. So I've got a Jenkins build server here with stormy clouds because a couple of them are not building right now. But yeah, I can go in here and have it build up the packages for me and send me a notice when I break something. So let's come out of that. So that's why they're broken up that way. It's just for, package test, put that on the Jenkins server. So yeah, basically the neural net stuff starts here in the OpenCL package. And effectively, this is my own import of the OpenCL headers, which I can tell you was not a trivial task. But I've broken everything down. So I break my packages down into API, interfaces, and implementation. So the interfaces, for example, if I come and take a look at, say, OpenCL here, I've got this OpenCL interface, which will give me the platforms. So that would be the GPUs or the CPUs that are available. And from those, or actually rather, that would be NVIDIA or AMD or Intel. And then from those platforms, I can fetch the devices, which would be GPU 0, GPU 1, and so on. So I've built this sort of interface-based wrapper around OpenCL. And then what I tend to do is under API here, I alias all of the types that matter from my other units so that I only have to use this in de.opencl, and that gets me my OpenCL implementation. So I built this OpenCL wrapper that gets me access to the GPUs, but then I wanted a way to switch between GPU and CPU without having to modify everything in the code. So I created this package called Math Engine, and the Math Engine has two implementations. It has an OpenCL implementation and a software implementation. The software implementation is just single-threaded CPU, and it does things like add vectors together, subtract them from each other, the same thing with matrices and so on. So I've got all of those functions there, but they're not convenient to use. You have to pass in these weird buffers to abstract the platform, whether it's OpenCL or software implementation. So I wrapped all of that into this math package. What the math package does is it provides you with a vector built from singles, vector built from doubles, vector from integers, and matrix of each. And actually, each of these, I'm wondering if I've gone down the right road here, but each of these is basically a duplicate of the code in the others. So vector single is a record, which represents a single-sized vector. It can have that vector as single elements in a local data array or in a buffer on the math engine, whichever implementation we're using. The reason for that is if I'm on the GPU, so a GPU functions kind of like a server, you upload stuff to it, and this buffer would be what gets uploaded to the GPU. But then if I want to access that data, I need to download it from the GPU again. So I download it into this local buffer. And then I've used operator overloading to give me addition, subtraction, multiplication, and so on. So I can actually now write, if I just put in, let's put a new project in here just to show this. So let's add a new project. Go with Delphi console application. So if I use in, let's see, de.math, so that gets me my math lib. And then what I'm doing is aliasing the type. So we'll say I'll have a vector. Let's call it V. If I want to put data in that vector, I can do it as, I'm going to have to save and build this, I'm sure. Okay, so I need to give it the path to project options. All paths, I can just hard code this path for right now. So if I come to my C drive, packages, out lib, so it's just a single directory here, and then whatever the platform is on the end of that. So if I go ahead and take the platform variables here, okay, so I should now have access to my mathlib. There are errors. Type. So type vector is a type of vector single. So I'm aliasing vector single as my vector type. And now what I can do is declare a vector, and then to put data in that vector, I can actually assign an array to it. So let's say I want 0.5, 0.2, 0.6, whatever. So that will actually build as a vector. And the same is true of matrix. So if I put a matrix type in here, matrix single, then I can declare that as m equals, and then it's going to be nested. So let's do 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, and then I can put in a second row, 0.2, 0.2. And then in order to do multiplication on this, I can do simply, we'll have a second vector, so v2. Multiply a vector by a matrix, you get a vector, so v2 is equal to m multiplied by v, and that will all build, or will it? Oh, I took out the exception stuff. That will all build and do the math, and then let's just prove it out. So we'll do Reichlen v2 to string. So if I run this, my antivirus is kicking in over the top of it. Let me kill that. Gonna have to wait for it. So my antivirus has an exclusion on my development directories, but because this is in the project directory, it's not excluded. So there we get my vector output as a string to the screen. So I can actually work with vectors and matrices really, really quickly now, which really does matter for the neural networking code. So let me close this project, don't need to save it. Close. I'm having a brain freeze moment. Okay, there we go. So now if I go and take a look at my neural networking code, so this library is called OOD, which is a nod to sci-fi fans that watch Doctor Who. So libood is the neural networking code, and within here I've got these interfaces. So I've got neural net is actually the network itself, that's the model. That's built up of layers, so those layers contain your neurons and the neuron weights that connect them together. I have a trainer interface, so this would be, for example, I have an implementation which is back propagation trainer right there, and a tester. And what the tester does is it uses a data set to test to see how accurate the network is returning its data. A couple of other bits and pieces, types and so on, but I only need to include de.ood because that aliases all of the relevant types. And then on the tutorial series, actually, what I did is I put together two examples. So the first one was this Mazur test, and this is because there's a gentleman by the name of Matt Mazur that wrote a neural network backpropagation blog post where he details all of the math with the results manually done, and so it was a useful example to copy because it allowed me to test the results against his and see that it worked. And then the example I'm going to show you right now is the binary counting example. So although procedurally you can count in binary very, very easily, there's no actual real need to do this in a neural net. Using binary counting as an example for a neural net is just a useful example that doesn't require a data set. So I can generate the data set on the fly. And so what I've done here is I've got this little output results method. All that does is output the results from the network. It's just writing the vectors to the screen, basically. Then I'm declaring my variables. So I have net is an iNeural net. I have training set. So this is going to be a data set that I'm going to train the network on. A trainer, which is the algorithm that will train the network. A tester to test for the accuracy of the network, and an accuracy variable to get that data back. I'm using my own logging unit here, so any log messages that come out will go to the console. And then with that math engine lib that I built, I'm selecting math engine 1. Math engine 1 is the first GPU engine. So I'm basically running this code on GPU, creating a neural net here with 3 layers, each of them with 3 neurons, setting the bias for each of those layers. And then I'm building up this training data set. Now, I actually did this in a loop previously. I only broke it out because I wanted to test passing in arrays of single or arrays of double as values. So that's why it's broken out. But as you can see here, what I'm doing, I'm putting in an input of 0, 0, 0, and I'm expecting an output of 0, 0, 1. But in an input of 0, 0, 1, I expect an output of 0, 1, 0. So I'm effectively telling it whatever input I put in binary, I want the next digit up as a result. And then creating a trainer, so I'm creating the back propagation trainer, and I'm also creating a tester, and then I'm writing out the initial accuracy of running that trainer, that tester, to see how accurate the network is in the first pass. And it should basically be completely inaccurate. It's random weights. It's not doing anything useful at this point. It's not trained. So we get random an accuracy level that should be something quite low. I'll put a readlin in here so that we can see what that is. And then I'm calling repeat. I'm training the neural net on the training set, and then testing it again to see the new accuracy and outputting that new accuracy value. And I'm running that until I reach 98.6% accurate. So no neural network will ever be 100% accurate, but you can approach 99, approach 100%, and 98.6 is plenty accurate for this example. And then finally, I'm outputting the results when given the inputs of 0 through 6. So I should basically get a count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, but I'm going to cheat a little here, and I'll explain why in just a moment. I'm going to change my math engine to 0, which is the CPU engine, and give that a run. And so what we get first up is, after it initializes, an accuracy of 59.3%, which isn't particularly accurate. It's basically random weights. I go ahead and run this, and it's now training, and we're now 98.6% accurate. And you can see the output here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for the inputs 0 through 6. So I've trained my neural network to count. Now, the reason why I switched the math engine is that with such a small neural net, I mean, we're using 3 neurons, so each of the vectors is only 3 elements deep. It's actually a massive performance bottleneck to send that up to the GPU. Because the PCI bus is so slow, I get a big performance hit from uploading and downloading the data and the instructions for each cycle. And you know, best practice, make the code work, then optimize it. I've done the make it work bit, not done the optimize it bit yet. And with such a small network on unoptimized code, if I run it with Math Engine 1, which is the GPU, you'll see that it's significantly slower. So again, 59%. I'm going to go ahead and run it. And I'm actually just going to let that sit there and run in the background. It's going to take a good 3 or 4 minutes to complete. But next step is optimize this code, train it against some larger networks. And I've downloaded the NIST data set to test against this. So I'm hoping to train it to recognize handwritten characters. So that's it. That's my neural net code.
Craig, that's really impressive.
It's the product of a lot of time and effort to get to what is, in neural networking, in AI terms, is very, very primitive. This is just a sigmoid-based backpropagation neural net, like people have been doing examples of for years. The advantage here is it isn't specifically just that. The neural net lib has the ability to do different activation functions. Like, you know, the typical one used is sigmoid for teaching, but ReLU is probably more commonly used now. So I have ReLU in there and a bunch of others, TANH and so on, as activation functions. And I also have a couple of other trainers that I'm working on, but for the moment, backpropagation gradient descent is the one that I have implemented. So yeah, it's a work in progress. It's coming later this year. I have the technology. I just don't know that I have the time and money at this point. But later this year, I'm hoping to do a self-driving go-kart using this very same neural net code. So, yep.
Sounds an amazing goal.
That'd be cool.
It should be fun.
I saw a question here about right to left support on Android. So we don't have that baked in yet, but there is a third-party FMX RTL that has right to left support for Arabic and Hebrew on FireMonkey for mobile devices, Android devices, Apple, PC. So if you are interested in that, take a look at this. I know it's something that product management has talked about possibly having in the future, but I'm not sure the current status of that. But you can certainly take a look at this now.
As for the suggestion that I insist the neural net calls me daddy or master, maybe because it's called libood, I'll have it call me the doctor. I already have a neural net that calls me daddy. I don't need another one.
I did notice that you had a lot of libraries there, especially around OpenCL. I mean, you translate a lot of stuff there, and then you put a Delphi wrapper, your interfaces for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't suppose, I don't know the answer to this yet, but is that available for other people to test out as well?
Not yet. It's something that, so all of this code effectively I want to make public, but it's going to be something that will, it'll be a little while because I have some additional bits that I want to put in it. And I actually want to package it up in a nice way with documentation. At the moment, I know how to use it. Nobody else will. So,
yeah, going from code that you can use to code everybody can use is a big step.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I'd like to do. It's a matter of finding the time to make it consumable.
Well, a couple of things I wanted to point out there. This is actually the first time that I've seen this code. So we've spoken before, including in the podcast, about the AI thing, but haven't actually seen that before. I was impressed by a couple of things. I noted at the beginning how many packages you had, but I think having that level of code separation where you can divide something into so many packages and you just have one package for a bit of functionality is really neat. And that indicates a very clean architecture to me.
Yeah, so there's a couple of disadvantages to it. I mean, for one thing, there are certain packages that you have to put conditional defines in very awkward places to make it function on multiple platforms. And you also have to make sure, unless you want to put in the source directory of every package, you have to put in the out directory. So you have to make sure that every package outputs to the same directory, which can be a problem on the build server. You then have to create like a nested directory with an out at the top of it and so on. So there's a couple of minor disadvantages, but I like separating my code this way. So just as an example, one of the next steps that I have with this project is I have a JSON package of my own, which serializes and deserializes JSON data. So I'm basically going to have it so that when I save the neural net, I can save both the topology and the weights, which is effectively the learning, to a JSON file and read that back in. And I also have a TCP/IP sockets lib that I wrote myself based on Windows sockets on Windows, so WinSock, and the Linux sockets lib. So it's basically a platform independent socket lib. So what I plan to do is have the neural net sitting somewhere on my network on the AI rig that I've built. And then I'll be able to connect to that using TCP, have it run tests and training. And as it's doing that, I'll bring back the neuron and weight data every few seconds, and then render that as, you know, the typical neural net diagrams that you see. Have it render that with color-coded levels for the weights and so on. And so the reason that I'm able to do that, I should be able to do that relatively quickly. The reason is that I have those packages lying around on my disk somewhere. They're not currently in my build server, and they're not unit tested in that server. They were unit tested when they were written, but I've since lost the unit tests. I've got to rebuild them. Yeah, I've got that code lying around, so I should be able to just drag those packages into this package group, and then I can add that functionality to my neural nets.
Hi, hello, how are you, Craig?
Oh, why are you playing my video?
I just thought I would show that you have some videos up here, and I forgot to.
That's a nice way of telling me to shut up, Jim.
No, sorry.
Well, actually, if you want to talk more, I was going to ask you about one other thing that I noticed, the second thing, which is that you were using Jenkins, you were using a build server, which is really good practice. Yeah, would you like to tell us a bit about that and advantages you find from it and that kind of thing?
Sure thing. So I actually, I recently did the webinar about it, which is on the welcome screen right now. I've been using Jenkins and Subversion for a long, long time, both commercially and for my own personal projects. The main reason for the build server is, and to be fair, most of my code, just to sort of, I want to make it look like I'm not being unprofessional about this. The vast majority of my code has been built against unit tests, uploaded into a build server, and then I have the build server run the unit tests, and it will tell me if I break something. Now, that's really useful in an architecture like this where I've broken everything into packages. If I go and modify a package lower down, and that impacts a package that depends on it, I'll get a notification saying that I've broken that. So, for example, if I go ahead and put in my TCP code into this application, and I change something in that code, and it damages another project that also depends on it, I'll know that something's gone wrong. I rebuilt I actually allowed my dev server to fall out of sync. Mainly, I'm going to blame Embarcadero here. It's not their fault, but I'm going to blame them. Because my job went from actually building and maintaining code to jumping from issue to issue. It's almost a firefighting type job. I didn't continue my own personal code base in quite the same way. I allowed it to just sort of, I remember I shut a server down because I wanted to swap from Windows to Linux and I didn't back it up properly. I lost a bunch of unit tests and I thought, well, I don't care. I know that code is tested. I'm not going to worry about it. And so over time, my code base fell out of sync. And when Jim asked me to do the webinar on continuous integration, I thought, well, I'm going to start rebuilding that server. I miss it. And I miss it because it's just so rewarding to look at that little sunshine icon saying your code builds and is perfect. Obviously, perfect is relative, but yeah, your code is currently building and passing all of its tests. And I actually, as I started putting tests into this code for that CI webinar, I remember sending a message to Jim saying, it's an obvious thing, but putting the test back in, I've already found 3 bugs in my code. So it just lets me know that this is all stable. If I know for a fact right now that I can depend on my TCP lib because I know it was unit tested before I lost the unit test code. It was unit tested and it hasn't been changed since. So I know I can rely on that code, and that just saves so much time in the long run. It takes time up front, but it saves a lot of time in the long run.
So
yeah, I fully believe that. Sorry, Jim, you're about to say?
No, I was just going to say during the webinar that Craig did on continuous integration on Jenkins, someone asked about a plugin for the IDE, and there is a plugin for Rad Studio for Jenkins. Just wanted to point that out real quick. But
there is a plugin. I don't use it because Jenkins can do command line batch execution. I just call MS build from the command line. It's relatively trivial to set up and gives me some control over what's going on.
Yeah.
Do you have it set to run on a trigger, like on a commit trigger?
Yep. Every time I commit my code, it builds that library and everything that it depends on. And that is actually a weakness of Jenkins, that it doesn't really have a dependency tree. You do have to install each dependency for each project you put into it. But that's a one-time thing. You back up the jobs directory. You only have to build a project with its dependencies one time.
That's very interesting to hear. The Jenkins plugin, I don't suppose you can put that in the chat or something else so that people can look it up, please.
I can. I keep telling you we have that here.
Also, as you're installing Jenkins, it has a plugins menu. You can go search in there and find it as well. So.
And here's the replay of
one reason I jumped on that is I don't use Jenkins for my own projects, although I do try to unit test the way everyone should. And by the way, I use Test Insight. Do you use Test Insight in the IDE?
I don't use Test Insight, and there's not a particular reason for that. It's that I never really got into it. I never really got into using it. I'm using DUnitX for unit testing. One package that it's a little bit pricey, so I don't have a personal copy, but has been invaluable to me in commercial environments before, is it SmartBear that owns it now? Test Complete, which is, you can macro record doing your tests, and then you can use Pascal scripts to modify those tests out. And that gives you the QA end of testing in an automated fashion. So you get, obviously unit testing is great and all, but it doesn't actually do much for application testing. So that's what Test Complete will give you. And I also, if I'm going to rave about products, I love Eureka Log. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So if you're not aware, Eureka Log will you integrate it with your app, and if an exception is fired anywhere in your application, it will trap that exception and upload it to you either via FTP or an email server or something like that. And so what you get is a UI that you can go into. You can find all of these times that your application crashed. You go double click on it, and it'll actually read through the call stack, open up your project source, and take you to the line of code that failed to execute on your customer's machine or your client's machine, whatever it might be. Just absolutely fantastic to be able to go straight to a line of code that has failed. And more often than not, it's actually obvious why it failed, because it's something that's executed once in 1,000 times and you never caught it during testing. But it'll take you right to that line of code, and that line of code will be .free, and you'll realize, hey, I must be freeing this more than once, or whatever it might be. So yeah, really, really valuable tool. Again, not one that I have in my personal projects just because of justifying the cost. If I were building something commercial here, I would definitely be using both of those products.
It's really cool to hear what you use. On the note of sort of promoting things like that, obviously use of things like that, I mean, just using Subversion by itself is, or any source control really, could be Git or Mercurial or something else, is really good. We found, like, we do a survey every, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know that if so I have my source code on my desktop, and I have a backup copy of it on my NAS, but if this house was struck by lightning, my source code's up in that Subversion server as well. So it serves as a personal backup as well as version control. And I also know that if I do something stupid in my code and check it in, I can also go revert back to previous versions and see what I did that was stupid. So
your server is offsite. You have one outside your house.
Cloud host.
Yeah, I do the same. I pay for a service that provides several different source control systems, and it lives somewhere in Europe. And there's a nice sort of external backup. One thing is we do a survey every year, the product survey, and we find out how many people, how many of our customers and users use things like source control and CI and that kind of stuff. And for source control specifically, I remember about 40% of people don't, which is a very high number.
That's really high.
And it's such a valuable tool just for your own safety. Not only in terms of a backup of your code, but also to be able to sort of go back in time to see what your code was at a particular release.
Yeah.
You have version 3.0.1 of your product, which your customer is using. What is the code they're actually running? Mm-hmm. So many other reasons to actually see the code in time. So we're sort of slowly trying to promote use of tools like this in the IDE. So we're thinking, I haven't got specific plans, but we're thinking now about how to integrate tools such as continuous integration tools within the IDE, or how to promote unit testing more. I mean, obviously we ship with TUnit and TUnitX, but you have to go file a new test project to actually get one. Can we make that a bit more obvious? Mm-hmm. And in the terms of making things more obvious, in 10.2.2, the very first time you run it after installation, it will pop up a screen, and that'll give you just a little bit of I don't know, customization, just because it's nice to sort of customize your IDE. In fact, I might have to just switch over and show you the screen if I can turn on.
Actually, I have a screenshot of here.
An idea that I had, a little thought your way, see what you think of it. Just because unit test is very valuable, important to me. But one thing that I found that, I keep my unit codes in, my unit tests, in a separate project. I would like to see a language enhancement, which would allow me to put a unit test method after a method that I've written, and a switch. So instead of having just release and debug builds, you could have a unit test build, which will go through all of the units linked into a project. And instead of building the executable, we'll actually build a unit test executable instead. I would love to see a language enhancement to do that, because then your unit tests are within your source code. And not only that, but unit tests also very often serve as documentation of how a method should work. So it could be a really useful sort of add-on to put into the language. But language enhancements are non-trivial, I understand.
Well, there are definitely ways we can think about doing that. So yeah, it's an interesting idea. I hope you can see the screen.
Yep, we see it.
So the first time that you start up Rad Studio, it'll look like this. Obviously, won't have a project open in the background or anything like that. But you'll see this dialog that pops up, and this is really just to welcome you and say, customize the IDE a bit, get it the way you want. So you can choose whether to start up with a light or dark theme. Obviously, you can change it any time and that kind of thing. And on the second page of it, you have a few useful settings, just some of the most common settings that we find people use. It's very common for people to install the IDE, straight away go and change a few settings. So what are those ones? The ones that people really, really like changing. So we've put those here, so you can make the IDE behave the way you want it right from the start, as well as having the settings migration tool. So you can turn on auto-saving files and layout, or the classic component toolbar, and change the default project folder. There's where you click the open button, where's it going to look? Save button, where's it going to look by default? That kind of thing. Many people don't even know that you can change that, and so every time you click save with a new project, you'll go through and navigate to where you keep your projects. But you can just set that up by default. But the thing I want to point out here is that we're trying to, as part of this effort to promote good development practices, right here on this front screen, the first time you start up Rad Studio, you're prompted to configure source control. So you can see 3 buttons there for Git, Mercurial, and Subversion. You click those, it'll show the options for setting those up. So you can see I have Subversion set up in Git. I don't have Mercurial set up on this VM. You can see a little warning there saying Mercurial executable not found. Obviously, you can ignore that if you don't use Mercurial, but it's just sort of a bit of a prompt saying, hey, before you go any further, just think about setting this up. And that gets it integrated into the IDE, because we do have source control integration. But we hope also as a bit of a prompt that if you're one of those 40% who don't use any form of source control, maybe seeing something like that as a bit of a prompt to investigate it.
Now, source control is really useful even in individual projects if you're the only developer on it. But if you're developing with anybody else or ever wanting to share code, source control is just invaluable then.
It's one of those things, if you're working in a team and you're not using source control, you are causing yourself a nightmare, because merging code with source control is non-trivial in a lot of cases. But without source control, I wouldn't even want to entertain that. I would not take a job today with a company that wasn't using version control, period.
Yeah. For teams of one or more, you need to have source control.
I understand. I've heard a rumor, and I don't know how true this is, but the rumor that I've heard is that Google uses version control, but that their entire code base for all of their products is in a single repository, and that makes me shudder, because it must take a day to download that thing, much less to build it.
I've read that Microsoft is doing something similar now as well, and they've been contributing back to Git a lot.
Well, Microsoft took an interesting turn in the latter part of last year, or maybe it was the earlier part of last year, which I don't know that I agree with. They laid off their entire dev testing team and said instead of using internal testing, they were going to use beta testers. And then Windows 10 was released with the Windows Insider program, which was the first real publicly visible effect of that. And since then, I have noticed glitches and bugs in Windows 10. I think they may have made a mistake there.
I hadn't heard about that. That is interesting.
So there's a YouTuber that I follow used to work for them and was laid off from them, and decided to try and make a living from YouTube exclusively, that tells the story from his perspective. And that's the way that I sort of found out about it. But then I started looking into it, and yeah, they laid off a huge amount of people on sort of there were 3 or 4 bouts of layoffs last year, or maybe end of the year before even. Maybe I'm losing track of time, but not more than 12 or 15 months ago. And then they started doing all these beta programs, expecting their end users to find their bugs, which is fantastic.
Yeah, maybe they're trying to be more agile and move quicker. I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't always understand things. So
I'm not going to criticize him for rumor and hearsay, but I just think that if that is true, I feel that's probably a mistake.
So I had shared this blog post, I guess last week, about New Year's coding resolutions, which of course the joke is that your New Year's resolution is measured by 7680 by 4320, which is 8K. But anyway, one of the things here I had was unit testing. But I was thinking about unit testing recently.
Your page is not found. The link you posted for it says not found.
Really?
Sorry to interrupt you there, but you posted a broken link.
Oh, YouTube's doing something to munge up my... That's really weird. YouTube's messing up my links. That's weird. Because I just pasted that in there. Why is that not found?
North Texas obviously has superior internet. I don't know, because I'm not seeing it either.
I wouldn't worry about it. We can post the link at the end of the podcast.
Sorry, Jim.
It looks right.
You
Anyway, one of the things I wanted to talk about, though, is I was realized that most of the code I write with Delphi is integration code and not, which you don't unit test integration code, you integrate test integration code, right? And that's because a lot of people say that, oh, it's hard to unit test my code in Delphi. I'm not sure why, and that's why people don't unit test as much. And then once I realized that, right? So if you're dropping a component on a form and a data set and connecting to a database, that's all integration code, right? But then you don't unit test data integration code. You unit test code that's like, the code that accesses the database itself, right? The FireDAC components and stuff like that. So a lot of times the code we're using should be unit tested, and then we are doing integration code. But so like the code Craig's writing to those libraries are what you unit test as opposed to the finished project.
Yeah, and actually I find, so maybe I'm unusual in this regard, but I find that the majority of code I write is, for my own personal projects, I rarely actually start a VCL application or an FMX application. I tend to start packages and test them with console apps, because I guess the kind of thing that I am more passionate about writing is low-level stuff. It's not application-level code. And Delphi is a fantastic product for application-level code. I certainly, it would be my preference every time for building applications. But, it just tends to be the things that I want to research and learn are low-level. So
yeah,
unit testing is necessary.
Yeah, I think for that kind of stuff, the reusable code, making it a package and then writing unit tests to test the code is the way to go.
Yeah.
So I had a blog post last week. Gosh, I can't remember. I called it The Curse of the Programmer. And basically, there's what's called the law of the instrument, which says if your only tool is the hammer, you treat everything like a nail, which you've probably heard before. I love that quote. But I say the curse of the programmer, there's 2 parts to it. The first part is everything you encounter, all the problems you encounter in life. You're like, oh, I could write a program to do this. Or I could write a better program to do this, is the similar version of it. And so you end up with lots of these programs we started but then rarely finish or provide to anybody else, because really we're just doing it to see if we can and such. But then the second part I see a lot is, I'm working with other developers especially, is they tend to want to create a framework or library out of whenever they're creating a program, right? So I was working with a developer a while ago, and his task was to create a couple of reports. And instead, in a couple of weeks, he's like, hey, I created this framework we can use to create reports. And it's like, well, we really need those reports. And I don't remember if the framework ended up being useful or not, but I know I've fallen in that problem before too, is a lot of times if I do something, I'm like, oh, I could make a framework to do this, to make it easier to do what I'm trying to do.
I have a package lying around here somewhere, two packages actually, a HTML package, which is, I took the DOM and I wrote a framework which basically replicates the DOM in Delphi objects. And then on top of that, I wrote a framework for building reports using that DOM representation. And to be fair, the one thing I really do enjoy with writing frameworks, and particularly this reporting framework, is having more control. So for example, most of the reporting packages that you can get for Delphi for application reporting tend to be VCL or FMX, which is perfect for Delphi. But I wanted to be able to take a report, generate HTML, and send that HTML in an email so that, CEO man can come along and get his morning email with a report in it. And I don't know if those reporting frameworks support it or not, but I went ahead and built my own HTML reporting framework to do that. So yeah, the fun I get out of coding now that I'm not on a product team or a maintenance team, the fun I get is being able to build those frameworks. It's one of the more enjoyable aspects of coding for me.
You certainly had a lot of frameworks in the code we just saw.
Well, that's what's that? That's 7 packages, 7, 8 packages of a set of, I must have 25, 30 packages lying around now. So, yeah. So, and all of them are useful. It does come at a cost, and that is a lot of these packages are built on top of and depend on each other. And you try to minimize dependence of any one package on another. But for example, my Unicode package, which has a Unicode codec within it, I probably don't need now because Delphi has it. I've had that codec since before Delphi supported Unicode. But most of my other packages depend on it. So it's now going to stick around because despite the compiler having Unicode support, that package is dependent upon. So yeah, that's the real curse of frameworks, is dependency.
Yes. So I'm just going to show this real quick. This is the page, my blog post I posted in there. I copied this, pasted it into YouTube, and clicked on the link, and this is the page it took me to, which doesn't work. But if you notice, the URL is exactly the same between these two. And if I reload this page, it works. But if I reload this page, it still says page not found.
That is weird.
Perhaps there's some other character coming in the YouTube version of the URL.
It must be something. I mean, I looked at maybe it was like a trailing space or something goofy, but I don't see anything. It's really weird. I don't know what's going on. But something there, because if I copy and paste this into a new tab, it still doesn't work. But if I copy and paste this into a new tab, it works.
Fantastic.
I don't know.
Maybe really you can post the real ones into like the description or a comment or something of the podcast at the end.
Yeah, I'll do something like
so
that.
They're there, just so we can find them.
Yep. Okay, so we're over time. I just want to mention this one last post I had here. The U.S. News and World Report does an annual report where they rank all these different things, including best jobs in the U.S. And this year they ranked software developer as the #1 best job. It's supplanted dentist and a number of other medical jobs. So yeah, software developer is now the #1 best job. Which, if you're on this listening to this, you probably already knew that because you're doing it. But just be aware that everybody's going to be coming to you now asking for career advice and such. Which I think software is going to continue to be important. Software development will continue to be important as we're seeing more and more automation going on. So, anyway, good choice in being a software developer. Now you know you made the right choice. As it were.
It wasn't really an option for me because I don't know how to fix people. Usually I consider people the broken component in my systems.
Yeah. Well, we had a discussion. I run a local software developers group. We talked about the fact that software developers usually not just about writing code. but oftentimes it's about talking to the users and figuring out requirements. And then sometimes it's explaining to users that, no, that's not what the software's supposed to do. And it is fixing people.
So I guess the flip side of that is that what you really want to be aiming for is software that does what the user expects it to do.
Yes.
As opposed to the user having to learn what the software does.
Yep. So, but that sometimes means explaining to the user things. But anyway, all right. Well, we're over time. Hopefully this was interesting for everybody, and I think I learned how to do this better for next time. So hopefully this will go smoother and we'll be able to get started closer to on time. But thanks everybody for joining us. Craig or David, anything you want to add real quick before we sign off?
Not much here. Just fantastic to do a live video podcast. Done a normal podcast before. Video one's fantastic. Hope you all enjoyed it. And I guess we'll see you next time.
Let's see if I can show all webcams again. Hey, there we are. Woo! Yeah. Craig, anything from you, Mr. Neural Networks?
Nothing much. Just enjoy your day.
All right, great. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you all next time on the podcast at Delphi.org. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Cheerio.
Now if I can figure out how to stop this.